Good evening. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Hallie Caldwell, and I am a member of the Quad Education team. I want to welcome you all to our webinar on engaging in and choosing extracurriculars. As I said, my name is Hallie Caldwell, and I'm a member of the Quad team. And Quad Education is a company that helps students and families prepare for the college admissions process. We work with students anywhere from grades 6 all the way through grade 12 to build their profile development and college candidacy development, help choose extracurriculars, help students choose classes, and then help students and families work through the college application process, from deciding what schools to apply to, taking SATs and ACTs, filling out applications, all the way through their acceptances. I want to welcome Paolo, who is an admissions counselor with us and is joining us today. Paolo, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Paolo. I will be the special guest admissions counselor to help guide us through this discussion today. To give you a sense of just the college admissions counseling community we have at Quad, I myself I am completing my MBA degree at Columbia Business School. A lot of our counselors range from alums to current graduate students. I also completed my bachelor's degree in fine arts, specifically film, in Tisch School of the Arts at NYU. So I like to think that I do have a good idea of the broadness of today's topics on how you might want to pursue your extracurriculars to set up a good candidacy profile in whatever college education path you may wish to pursue. So thanks for coming, and I'm excited to get into this.
Great. Thanks so much, Paolo. So we'll dive right in. So today we're going to cover quite a bit. We're going to have an overview about extracurriculars in general, the different types of extracurriculars that you may encounter, examples of those. We'll talk about extracurriculars as they pertain to your major and interests that you want to pursue in college, the importance of extracurriculars, some tips for success when choosing them. And then we'll open things up for a Q&A. So as you have questions through this, feel free to pop your question in the Q&A box, and we'll get to those at the end. And we'll leave a good amount of time to answer them. So what is an extracurricular? Specifically, it means not falling within the scope of a regular curriculum. And so there are many different types of activities that fall outside of your everyday classes within school.
Yeah, and Howie, I just want to emphasize that, and I'm sure many of you attending this webinar in particular understand just how significant this part of your application might be. I myself can attest to how important extracurriculars were in my path, both in my undergraduate candidacy as well as my graduate candidacy. I believe we should have a diverse audience here right now who might lean more into their more academic performance metrics such as GPA and whatnot, and others who might more strategically lean into this stuff. So I understand that the word extra is in the word extracurricular, but by no means is it kind of a more minor part of your application. You should be taking these very seriously, and you should be very proud of your extracurricular activities right now.
Absolutely. I think as it pertains to the application process, you have all of your grades, you have your GPA, test scores all on paper, you have teacher recommendations, but extracurriculars are a way for you to show who you are, what you're passionate about, and where you spend your time outside of the classroom to colleges and universities. And so it's giving them a fuller picture of who you are. So they are definitely important. All right, so let's dive into the different types of extracurriculars. So we have about 5 different categories of extracurriculars a lot of different extracurricular activities fall within multiple of these categories. But just to list them out, we have service or volunteer-based extracurriculars, school-based, work, academic, and structured programs. Paolo, do you want to talk a little bit more about these?
Yeah, and we're going to delve into each one specifically, but overall, I hope you can appreciate the whole theme of this talk right now is to make sure that you curate a very holistic candidacy and the fullest picture of yourself that you can possibly present to admissions committees. And by the way, admissions officers are very smart. They know that each candidate that's applying to their school is presenting a very limited view of really your journey up until this point. It's more about the strategy and helping guide them towards hopefully when it comes to service or volunteer, things that you really care about in the world, or when it comes to other things that you're really passionate about, and those weigh heavy in the admissions process for sure.
Great, thank you for that. So we're going to go into a little bit more detail now. We're going to break down those 5 different categories and talk about what belongs in each of them and what some additional categories are within those as well. So academic is kind of the first one, and these aren't AP classes, they're not IB courses, as those are still a part of your normal curriculum. These are after school activities like participating in Model UN conferences, and other things that fall like mathletes, anything that kind of supplements your academic work outside of the normal school hours.
Yeah, and there's definitely, if you just look at this category alone, it's quite vast, and a lot of this is strategy, right? So if say you're a star student, you have a solid GPA, you're very, I don't know, STEM heavy or whatever, and you just kind of want to really go all the way with that in your application. It's like, oh, I did all of that and I'm in MUN. But it also works for people who have maybe more average grades in those sense. So like, let's say in IB English or whatever, because I was certainly on this boat. And again, as you can imagine, I had my undergraduate degree was very much in the humanities, but my IB English grades were very much average. But the fact that I participated in certain things such as forensics and whatnot, right? So it's like it's very interesting. This kind of expands the scope of the academic profile you're trying to portray. So you can either use more academic extracurriculars to enhance your strengths, or you can use it to fill in the gaps. And actually, this last bullet point is very important. I have had a few peers, colleagues, and clients who've attended pre-college summer programs. I think for the most part, we're familiar with these. So you can attend a pre-college, I think in your last summer, right, of high school, you can spend the summer at, say like Columbia or like whatever dream school you want. I believe there is a bit of a mini admissions process there, but that does enhance your application, and you definitely do want that to come out in your application. It doesn't, by the way, it's not automatic, right? You have to enter this. That's not, your school college counselor isn't going to automatically input it. But if they know you well enough, they're going to remind you, hey, make sure you put that summer you spent at BU, put that in there. And that definitely falls under academic extracurriculars.
I think this is a great time to just add a tip that, starting now, if you don't already, you should be writing down everything that you're doing, when you started, how long you did it for, some key takeaways from what you did, kind of what your role was within the club, within whatever extracurricular you were doing. So you will remember when you're writing these down. It's easy to forget when you're trying to fill out an application that has a lot of parts and you're very stressed. So we'll move on here to the next slide. So sports, it's not a category that we covered earlier, but is generally, you generally participate in sports through your school or within your community. It's very self-explanatory. Track and fields, football, soccer are all different sports. But we also want to mention that some unorganized sports as well may kind of fall in that extracurricular activity. If you're a figure skater, if you participate in swimming outside of school, that also can count. Running marathons is something that could be an extracurricular. You're putting a lot of time and energy into that.
Yeah, and Hallie, I just want to add that this is actually one of two categories that are particularly close to my heart, that I just want to, from this point on, really get you in that more expansive mindset of really thinking about all the little things you do and realizing that, maybe they have value. So we're going to go into other categories such as the arts and hobbies, but to give one anecdote, firstly, so again, I'm a current MBA student, which is very much like a professional degree. So I've been working for close to 10 years prior to that, and I am currently working several things now. One of which is I manage an association remotely in the Philippines for a brand new Olympic sport. I don't know if you know that, which is breakdancing. We actually call it breaking, right? And up until the International Olympic Committee announced that it was an official sport, it was very much, and has been for the past 5 decades, an art form, right? Back in high school, so to put myself in your shoes, I actually started an unofficial group in our school where I was pretty much one of the only people that was into breakdancing, but I took it very seriously and I started teaching other people. We had an informal group, and I was close enough to some of our fine arts faculty to let us use the room sometimes. By no means were we an official club, but my school counselors definitely made sure not to leave that part out. So again, when we're talking about sports here, it doesn't matter if you didn't make varsity or JV or whatever team, or even if the team is affiliated in your school. If it's something that can be identified as a sport, maybe your school doesn't have a pool or billiards as a sport within its umbrella, but maybe you've won a couple of tournaments outside of that, and that's like what you like to do on the side. Definitely include that. Don't let your own school system be your barriers to really presenting a fuller picture of yourself. So with that said, in case anyone in the audience is a break dancer or a breaker, b-boy, b-girl, that's what we call them. That's a sport now. You can actually leverage that if you're really into that. I just want to get you in that mindset now, again, with figure skating as well. Get you in that mindset. But skating is an Olympic sport now. If you are a skater with enough street cred, so to speak, I'm pretty sure there are actual established tournaments for that kind of stuff where you can say, oh, I won, first place at such and such. You would certainly not want to exclude that from your profile whatsoever. So yeah, sports is one of those places where there's definitely a lot of flexibility. And I might go as far as to say esports, right? I'm sure some of you might actually be on school teams for certain games, whether it be League of Legends, Overwatch, and whatever. I mean, if you're good enough, why not put that in there? A lot of those athletes are actually paid more money than traditional sports athletes. So there you go.
We'll dive a little bit more into the e-sport video game arena in a little bit. One question I would love for you to answer just now is, while we're talking about sports and being able to add sports that aren't necessarily a part of your school, I think just, can you clarify a little bit? Like if I go skiing 4 times a year with my family, that doesn't really count as a sport. But if I ski competitively and I'm there couple times a week and am a part of a team or am entering in tournaments, that is more of an extracurricular than the occasional leisure?
So that's a very good question. I think the operative word that you had was competitive, right? And again, it doesn't say specifically in this slide, but when we talk about sports, we just at least college admissions want to they want to frame you in reference to your kind of how competitive you were in that particular sport versus certain peers or whatnot. If you do go ski trips with the fam a couple times a year and you love it, and again, I don't know anything about the competitive skiing community or whatnot, but we're gonna go more into this later. But we also have a hobbies category and whatnot. So there are definitely areas for which you can insert activity. You'll find that certain have a mentor out there who can more strategically put that, right? So you can have something in sports, but it's like, oh, does it make your candidacy stronger if that thing is in sports, or if that thing is in the example of breakdancing, if that thing is in art, because dance is also an art.
All right, let's move on. I think next we're going to talk about arts. So you have performing arts, visual arts, instruments, choir, any sort of kind of artistic like class that you take, if it's not necessarily class, but outside of school, if you're a part of school plays, local plays, if you take art classes outside of school, or just participate in different art clubs, that type of thing, instruments, both in and out of school, choir in and out of school, those all count as extracurriculars under the arts category.
Yeah, this one's so important, and I actually like playing a game where I try to squeeze this out of my clients. So for instance, I have a client right now here at Quad who is very much STEM oriented in his candidacy, but he won basically it was either a state, maybe even like a regional art competition for a portrait like a personal portrait he submitted. By no means does he have any formal arts training, and I began to find out that his art class he takes on the weekends with one of his teachers. So it's actually not, it's not like IB art, higher level or lower level or whatever, AP art or whatnot. It's just something he takes on the side. And by the way, which he doesn't think he's even good at. But the guy won second place in this competition, and we certainly put that. We definitely frame that he's applying to economics, more economic focused and business focused schools. We're kind of leveraging this narrative as how creativity also plays a part. So again, exercising that this participating in this thought exercise as you kind of reflect right now throughout this webinar, really stretching the imagination, thinking, really putting aside that more doubtful voice in your head of like, oh, like, does this really count as something? I'm not that good at it or whatever. And next thing you know, you're really good at it. Before this call, Hallie and I were talking, and we've found that with a lot of our clients or just people we know in our lives who are trying to apply to anything, whether it be higher education or jobs, we tend to undershare more than overshare. A lot of people don't give as much information as they could. If you're a current client with Quad, or if you're going to be a future client with Quad, my advice is to overshare as much as possible. I told my clients since day one, I am the last person you want to be humble with, because if you don't give me something like that, it's not going to show up on the thing. You give me all the things, and we'll decide later whether to put them out. So with arts, let me just think. I was in I was in school at a pretty historic time where film was actually an IB course. It was one of the first years where film actually had an IB curriculum and was offered in certain schools. My school was definitely one of the first in Asia to offer it. So I was able to actually, you could see I had a grade to it too. And I even participated in a local school festival for that. So if you took that same example a few years earlier before it was formally introduced into academics, filmmaking, hey, if you actually made films while you have a YouTube channel or whatever, that's arts, by the way. It might not fall under your official school curriculum, but if it's a substantial enough part of your identity, then you should definitely show that to admissions officials.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we're going to keep moving along here. So work in internships, just because you're, if you're if you're not doing like clubs or extracurriculars and you need to be working after school or taking care of your household, babysitting younger siblings, that doesn't mean you aren't doing extracurriculars. That doesn't mean you are at a disadvantage when applying to college. Working a part-time job is absolutely an extracurricular. It's an activity that you do outside of school. You're learning things. If you're participating in a research project, interning at a company, and as I mentioned, like babysitting siblings, taking care of.
Sorry, I'm not sure.
Grandparents.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, sorry about that, everyone.
Go ahead.
Where did I pop off there?
Take it from the bullet points.
All right. So part-time jobs, if you are getting paid to do a job at a local business, anything where you're getting paid, that's absolutely an extracurricular if you need to be making money. If you are taking care of a grandparent, a sibling after school on the weekends, that counts as an extracurricular. Just because you have responsibilities and don't necessarily have time for after school clubs or activities, that doesn't mean you're at a disadvantage. Those are all definitely counted and should be talked about.
Yeah, and I think this is pretty straightforward. So we don't need to go into too many specifics, but I just want to say that the thematic value for work and internships in your application, which also pertains to what kind of field you want to go into. Obviously, work and internships, you can leverage a good story if you want to go for a business degree, right? Or maybe in economics, if you want to major in economics as well, or even in the arts. So for example, if you wanted to pursue graphic design or something and you did some freelance graphic design work and it got published on a notable blog or website, you definitely want to show that. So the work and internships categories is something that it's quite versatile, and you, especially if you're a junior right now, you might have enough time, if you haven't already, ready to fit one of these in if it can strengthen your candidacy.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest point that after what Paolo said is that if you have responsibilities at home that don't allow you to participate in as many extracurriculars as you would like, or as many as your peers, that does not mean that you can't get into a competitive college. It doesn't mean that you don't have something to put down and valuable experience to take away. All right, so hobbies. We covered this a little bit earlier, but we'll talk about this a little bit more. So hobbies can count as extracurriculars. Paolo mentioned esports earlier, but I'm going to broaden that to video games. Esports absolutely could be an extracurricular. Video games, if you play video games after school, sometimes not necessarily an extracurricular, but if you play video games and are working on developing a video game, that you can probably categorize as an extracurricular if you are taking something, learning from it, building something, making it an independent project. For a hobby to count, it must be something you participate in regularly, and that contributes to your personal growth. So if you write poetry in your spare time, that might not necessarily be an extracurricular, but if you join a poetry club, if you're putting together a book of poetry, that's something that could be turned into an extracurricular.
Yeah, and I think, there's other than that, there are no hard and fast rules. Again, like with biking, I mean, if you actually like race and you're participating in races or triathlons or whatever, that might be under sports, for instance. But yeah, I will say, you know, a lot of people have their quirks. I had a professor who was a competitive crossword puzzler. Although I don't expect many prodigies, like high school prodigies, and that it tends to be older folks. But you might have something in there that you're not considering. But again, to Hallie's point, just make sure it's something you do regularly. I also like to see like the social. I like to consider the social application of an extracurricular as sort of a criteria for it. So, for example, with breakdancing. And we'll go into this category in a bit, but I also made sure to actually organize a tournament before I left to college. And that fell under another category that we'll go into earlier, but that kind of will help you solidify certain things into like, yeah, this is like a real hobby because, it takes up a bunch of my time, and a lot of other people can attest that I do this thing at a high level.
That's a perfect segue to our next slide here, which talks about leadership focused activities. So this is everything from student governments, creating clubs, like maybe an official or unofficial breakdancing club, or organizing volunteering activities like blood drives, food banks. If you have a hobby that is not
just a couple lag spikes. There you go.
all right.
Take it from, I think you're in an organization.
Yeah. So blood drives, food drives, organizing a peaceful protest. Those things are all kind of a part of, if you are a leader in some way, if you're creating something new, gathering a group of people to do something meaningful together, can absolutely be an extracurricular. That doesn't necessarily mean gathering your group of friends to go and try every flavor of ice cream over the summer. Not necessarily an extracurricular, but turn that into an official club where you create ice cream flavors and pitch them to your local ice cream shops. That might be something.
Maybe that is the thing, actually.
And then student government as well. You don't need to be the president.
No, that's great. That this is the lead. Yeah. But is it safe to say, Hallie, that the kind of like the leadership focused angle on a lot of these activities, it'll take precedence over just like you participating in them, right? So basically, leadership focus can apply to any, right, of the categories that we've already talked about. But certainly, if you are the president of that thing, you kind of want that to like come first, like you don't want to say, oh yeah, I was part of this official dance club thing, and then just leave out the fact that you were actually the founder of it, right? And that you actually held those. They definitely want to see this. I don't know any major or college focus that doesn't like to see leadership. So that's definitely the narrative you want to paint.
Absolutely.
For your candidacy.
And I think in addition to that leadership, you don't necessarily need to be the president of your club, but if you show that you're taking initiative, if you're helping plan events, if you're really providing value to the club or organization you're in, that also can be a type of leadership. You don't need to go and be president of every club that you're in for it to count and matter. All right, let's move on. So just a little bit more on extracurriculars. it's possible for their extracurriculars to fit within all of these categories, within multiple categories. Colleges and universities are not looking for you to hit an extracurricular in each category. These are just different ways to think about extracurriculars that you might have, that you might actually be participating in, but not be aware of. Student government is an example of that. It's leadership, it's academic, it's school-based. And that doesn't kind of, you don't need to be checking off the boxes of each of these. And
Agreed.
Don't need to get caught up in categorizing them. Schools aren't going to categorize them for you. This is more for your own reflection.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to just go through some ideas based on potential majors and interests. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this, but just give you a little food for thought here. So some ideas here. If you're interested in business, you're interested in pre-law, liberal arts, pre-health, STEM. There's a lot of extracurriculars that fit within those or among multiples of those. If you're interested in studying these things in college, these are just some ideas of places you can go there, or extracurriculars that could be impactful. So business extracurriculars, volunteering at small businesses, working at a local office, setting up fundraisers, business management summer programs. You don't need to do all of these. You don't need to do any of these to be a business major. But if you're looking for something to do, these are some good places to start.
Yeah, isn't that crazy how basically every category we've covered kind of falls under one of these? It's you can really what admissions officers are really looking at is the message you're trying to convey by your choice of activity, what that says about you, especially if you took a leadership position, what that says about what you care about, and yeah, but I mean, the world of business is vast, right? Definitely, again, as a business school student myself, business is definitely not just merely relegated to the fields of, say, finance, right? You also have marketing and entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is all about leadership, and entrepreneurship is about creativity as well. Whether you're applying to an entrepreneur-focused school such as Babson College, or like Stern, NYU Stern, they're looking for leaders at the end of the day. And leadership can show in a lot of different ways, including, by the way, we haven't spent much time on this, including a lot of the volunteer work. Yep. Okay, that's definitely something to look into. And I think that's something hopefully everyone is capable of doing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we'll go through some more of these. We won't spend too much time as we leave enough room for Q&As, but being a library volunteer, joining theater productions, museum internships, travel programs, working at a local newspaper, creating a neighborhood newspaper. Those are all fall within the liberal arts fields. Pre-law, you might want to mentor students. You might want to intern at a law firm. Pre-law related summer programs, the debate team, student government are all great ways to get some experience there as well. Paolo, do you have anything you want to jump in here with this slide and the past one?
No, there's definitely, as we can see, we're seeing a lot of overlap as well. I'd say it looks like pre-law is definitely something where student government comes into play a lot, but again, also like with business. So it's just how we might not have explicitly mentioned it, but also one key takeaway throughout this talk is we by no means want you to overload your extracurriculars, right? Don't throw everything at them. You have to. It's all strategy at the end of the day. You have to pick and choose. So again, this is more of, as we go through these different majors and focuses and you see like which things apply to them, it's not a matter of like making sure you get everything. It's a matter of, oh, that thing you get, maybe you were more like passion focused or like culturally focused. Say if you were going into liberal arts, it's like, oh, you'll frame it more on the cultural side. But actually, if you want to take a pre-law angle, you'll frame it more from, say, like a leadership side or something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just like if you want to go into law, you don't need to do all of these pre-law extracurriculars. If you don't know what you want to be, you don't need to take extracurriculars that you think a college will like. Maybe you want to look at the extracurriculars that you do love and are part of and have that help guide what you might want to study in college as well. All right, so pre-med, volunteering at a hospital, STEM related clubs, working at animal shelters, labs, science, research, all of those can fall under pre-med, as can many of the other things that we talked about. And then STEM is our last one here. So working with youth, teaching STEM, helping with kind of science projects, joining math or science clubs, any sort of science, technology related volunteering activities can all fall under STEM. Robotics club. To be a STEM major, you don't need to have participated in all of these. You don't need, it's not a requirement. It does help you, but it's not, you don't need to do all of these. So why is extracurricular involvement so important? They differentiate your application. They show off who you are as a person. They kind of build out the fuller picture of you after the stats that colleges are seeing. And past actions can be an excellent predictor of future behavior. If you are contributing to your community, colleges really love to see that you want to be an active participant in the world. So if you are doing that from a young age, that shows kind of who you might be in the future. Any other thoughts here, Paolo?
Yeah, I think just to add on to that, there are a lot of, I think it's important, including in as early as the school selection phase, that you really go onto the university site and look into what that school's philosophy is and what they value. You'll find keywords such as diversity, culture, impact. You might see that a lot, and that should give you like really clear signals that, hey, like, okay, oh, I volunteered at a homeless shelter like a couple of times like past summer. That would definitely appeal in particular to this college. It's like, oh, I went on this trip to this country that I've never been, and we did I don't know, a philanthropic activity there. That's definitely something you want to show. So it's also, it can go, you might want to strategize, your strategy in your entire application process might actually vary from school to school, but this is you can't change your GPA between applications, and you can't change your SAT or ACT score. What you can change is first of all your supplemental essays for that. So if you haven't seen the supplemental seminar, definitely tune into those, and we might have a recording for that, Hallie, I think. But if not, this is the kind of stuff that shows in your extracurriculars. What admissions officers are really, the clues that they're looking into with extracurriculars is what you really care about. Because again, it's extra. It's something that you're not, I'm not saying you're forced to go to school or whatever, but it's something that like, it's like, you don't have to check off like X amount of science classes in your degree. This is something that you do in your spare time. And time matters to people of any age. We know how much you care about your time. So when you put these extracurriculars, you're kind of signaling to admissions officers, hey, I care about this thing, and I know you care about it too. So yeah, I just wanted to add that bit of flavor to the conversation. All of this is about communicating subconsciously to admissions officers. who you are as a person.
Yeah. All right. I think that's great. So just a few last minute thoughts we want to leave you with, and it also kind of stems off of that. I'm going to start with the be authentic piece of this. So Paolo was just mentioning finding schools that have mission statements that follow that kind of have similar themes with your extracurriculars. We are not saying that if you want to go to Harvard, you go and look at their mission statement in school and then decide what extracurriculars you do based on what you think they will want to see. Schools want to see that you are doing things that you are passionate about, and you'll find schools that will fit within that. And you can also make extracurriculars fit within other categories. All the skills you learn translate, but be authentic. Do things that you're passionate about. Like this is another way to communicate who you are. Quality over quantity. Just because you can do 50 extracurriculars does not mean that you should. Colleges want to see that you are putting your time and energy into something. You're not just checking something off. Show that you're committed. That goes a long way. They want to see that you pick something and stick with it if you really love it. That doesn't mean you can't try new things. It doesn't mean if you decide you don't like something, you should not stop doing it. Or like you can't stop if you don't like it and find something else. And then as we talked about, don't go overboard. You have other commitments. You have school, you have grades and studying for SATs. Put time into those as well. That's also very important. Any additional thoughts before we dive into Q&As here? All right. So let's see. A Q&A, a question we have is, does the order of activities, should you put it by the number of hours or years that is involved? And so if you're asking about like where you should be putting them in the Common App, Paolo, do you have a specific strategy for that, or as long as it's within the activity section, it doesn't matter?
Yeah, I wouldn't say order doesn't matter. So it definitely is a factor. It's definitely a good question, but I wouldn't also say that it has to do with number of hours or years. So it's interesting. This is actually almost like a philosophical question, right? So I'll give you an example. I did cross country for 4 years, and I was even the team captain. And honestly, the only reason I stuck with it for so long was because I knew it would look good on my college app, and it did. I'm pretty sure it helped me get into college. Not that I was trying out for the team. That's another thing. Although I do think my times were good enough for at least the NYU team. Anyway, that's an aside. But my point is, it's up to you, right? Again, at the end of the day, it's strategy. So hours or years involved signals a lot. It could signal loyalty. That's certainly something I want to signal. Whether I liked it or not, maybe I was signaling passion for cross country, but to be honest, as soon as I graduated, I like never ran again. I was like, this is so boring. But I was good at it, and maybe you want to show off that you're good at stuff. So I would say order of activities. It may go by number of hours or years involved, but what's more important is you frame it. You can potentially frame it as to the relevance of what matters to the schools you're applying to, or you know what, if you just want to like show your true authentic self, maybe you have something that's like way out there. By the way, again, like just to give an example, like competitive crossword puzzling, right? And I think I'm looking at a bunch of the other questions, and I think a lot of this will have to do with strategy. There's no right or wrong answers, but if your immediate strategy is to show people that you're different, then boom, put competitive crossword puzzling like as like, if not number one, put it as like number two. Maybe number one you start off with, like, your if you're MUN, like, that's fine. If you're varsity at in school team, you can definitely put that as number one. But yeah,
so
it's up to you how you want to curate.
It sounds like it's pretty situational and will depend on the story that you're trying to tell.
Yeah.
So if you don't do a sport in high school, will it look bad on your college application? Right now,
Ooh,
say it won't look bad, but make sure you're doing something else that is important, maybe shows that you can be a part of a team, that
yeah.
you're spending your time doing something else.
Hallie, that's a really good answer. I think this is one of those forever questions that you'll get in all sorts of talks, and I get it. Look, at the end of the day, the reason why, and this is ridiculous, but the reason why we kind of differentiate academics from sports is there's supposedly two ends of like a spectrum. It's like, oh, this is my intellectual side, and this is my brawny side, and you're trying to show, it's a little foolish, and there are ways that you can kind of convey that you do have the certain qualities that you get, like the certain morals you get out of sports, whether it's like leadership in a particular thing, or actually what Ali mentioned is that's just a universal quality everyone wants to see. Everyone wants to see teamwork, right? And that's also why you want to put in jobs, you want to put in internships, you want to, and I'll tell you why this matters for admissions officers. You might not get this piece of insight from a lot of counselors or whatever, but I can tell you right off the bat what a lot of schools look into, whether for good or bad, is they look into how your potential for success to work in the future, right? So you always see these stats for like employment, how, and regardless of the condition of the economy, they want to know that you're going to be someone who can like work jobs in the future, because that makes their school look better, right? So they're trying to get an early sense of these qualities in you, that you're a cool person to work with, and you're good in the workplace.
It's a great answer. I think that also kind of goes into this next question. What if you're interning in a field that's not related to your fields?
Yeah.
I'll kind of give a quick overview, and Paul, I'm sure you can add some more context,
Sure.
but I think the first thing I'll say here is when you are in high school and you have a decided field, you're applying to college, that doesn't mean you're going to continue on in that field. You might intern in something that you don't think is where you want to go in the future, but find that you really love it. And that opens a whole new pathway for you. But
Yeah.
the skills that you're picking up while interning, whether that's in a law office, a doctor's office, if it's in a STEM field, a lot of the skills you're going to pick up there are going to translate across the board. The fact that you're trying something new, you're spending time in an office or learning about some profession, that's the important piece.
Yeah. And Hallie, that was a perfect answer. That's exactly what I wanted to say. I just wanted to add one piece of insight for especially for all the candidates in the room, people who are looking to essentially take the first step into their future. I know there's a lot of pressure on you right now. It's not really gonna go away even when you're older, but just always remember that none of this is ultimate, none of this is final. This is just the next step of your lives. Admissions officers are smart enough to know that. They're probably going through that in their own lives as well. And again, like, yeah, so sorry if this might be controversial to some parents as well, but there's always the chance for change. You're going to college, you're going to explore, you might take a class or two outside your major, and you're like, oh wait, I kind of like philosophy, maybe I'll take more philosophy classes, or you'll see once you get into college. I know everyone's going to get into college, you're going to do a fantastic job in the future, I just know it. You're going to see a lot of your peers pivot, and honestly, first of all, that's a sign of wisdom. Second of all, if officers can already see you have that flexibility, that you have, like, you're like a straight up, your grades are solid, your academics are fantastic, and then you're like you're like a competitive bodybuilder, right? So it's like, boom, it's like, you colleges like seeing people with a lot of versatility and depth, because they know that you're going to be faced with really tough decisions in the future that you might have to like slightly pivot your direction to get where you want to go, or where you think you want to go.
I think that's a great answer. And, college extracurriculars, all of it, they open up new doors for you. They help you discover things that you like, you don't like. You're going to find new things. Just keep doing things that you're interested in. This is a great question here. How do colleges filter the real from the fake? If a lot of students do kind of these same extracurriculars, what stops someone from making things up? I'm pitching that to you, Paolo.
Okay. No, oh my gosh, that's an excellent question, but I think it goes back to the earlier slide of quality over quantity. Look, by the time you apply, you would have had close to 4 years in high school, and I don't think any of you are spending those 4 years just like sitting around and stuff. Even if you're sitting around playing video games, you might be a competitive esports player. Who knows? But with that said, I think that ties into like an earlier question too, about kind of like the hours committed will show, like how long you've been doing it for kind of shows too. And certainly look, between some of these things, okay, volunteer work, for instance, I think that among the different categories, volunteer work might be the least recurrent. Sometimes, you're gonna you hear of like a particular, I don't know, food drive at the thing, and like, it's just like they only have that food drive like once a year, and you participate in that, and that's okay. That'll show you showed up and you helped feed people and stuff. That's definitely as real as it gets when it comes to volunteer stuff. But yeah, in terms of parsing the real from the fake, look, if you have just one hobby, but man, it's something that you just do like every time on your spare time and it looks good in your application, then yeah, focus on that versus three different things. It was like, oh yeah, I think I took a couple of lessons in this one instrument, and maybe I'll throw that in because there's space. Don't do that.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure you have to put the amount of like when you did these certain extracurriculars, how many years, what grade level. So if someone is testing out a bunch of things, colleges see that. They know if you're kind of adding things in.
Yeah, these people are smart. So so if you're wary that it like even on your end, it's kind of like if you're like, oh, this is a bit of like pushing it, they might be able to tell. So yeah, just be aware of that.
Yeah, I think you just want to focus on what you've done and what you're interested in, and making your application as authentic and true to you as possible. So we have time for one more question here. So in the Common App, is it required to only put activities starting in 9th grade? What about things that you did prior to freshman year of high school? Paolo, I'll pitch this to you, I think.
Yeah, this one's a really tough one. Again, I just like to think that, yeah, sorry, I don't know any of the details, but I like to think that going back to earlier, by the time you applied, you would have had clocked in 3 solid years in high school. You'd have had as many experiences that I hope kind of outperform prior to 9th grade. And it's true, I get it. I was insanely active in middle school. I even directed a play at my church in middle school, and I don't think I was able to fit that one in. I also worked at a restaurant, so I couldn't put that in, but it's okay because the stuff I put in more than compensated for that kind of stuff. What I will say is, look, I don't have the best answer right now, but you're gonna be writing some very interesting essays, like personal statements. A lot of those personal statements, more or less, they go into childhood a lot. Who knows, like if it doesn't make the final cut for your extracurriculars, maybe if you really think it's that significant, that's probably one heck of a story for your personal statement. So that's the best answer I can give right now.
Yeah. And I think to add to that, if you played soccer from 3rd grade to 7th grade, that's not something you necessarily want to put on your application. But if you played soccer starting 2nd grade all the way through your senior year of high school, like you can put that in and you can say that you did it for all of those years. You don't need to leave it out just because you started prior to high school.
Yeah.
All right. So I think that brings us to a close today. I want to thank everyone who joined us. I know I had a great time, Paolo. It was great talking with you about extracurriculars. I hope everyone took something away from this. We'll be sending out an email with a recording of this webinar in the coming days. If you are interested in quad education, feel free to reach out to us. We have forms on our website where you can schedule a free consultation. Send us an email and you can talk to our team to learn how we can help you fulfill your goals. And I hope everyone has a really great night. Paolo, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.